This video is going to go over how to solve quadratic inequalities. So in the previous video, we discussed an example and went through all the steps. So let's go ahead and do another example. So step number 1 is you want to solve this as if it was an equation. So we're going to solve this, so step 1, as if it was 6x squared minus 3x equals 0. Okay, so now in this chapter we've learned all different methods for how to solve quadratic equations. So when I look at this problem, I immediately want to factor because I see that the GCF here is 3x. So I'm going to go ahead and factor this. So I'd have 2x minus 1 here. And then it's completely factored, so we're going to set each of these equal to 0. And again, if you don't want to factor, you can use one of the other methods we learned in this chapter, such as quadratic formula, completing the square. Okay, so that was step number 1. Step number 2 is we are going to put those solutions as our boundary numbers on our number line. So step number 2, I'm going to go ahead and make a number line. The smaller number should go first, so 1/2. And, oh, I'm sorry, not 1/2, 0. So 0 is smaller than 1/2. And then we'll put 1/2 here. Okay, now, these numbers right here are boundary numbers. So we have to put either a solid circle, if it could equal these numbers, and an open circle like the last video if it can't. So since it has this line right here, it means or equal to. So that means these numbers will make these equal 0, so we're going to go ahead and put solid circles. If this problem did not have that line, then we would put open circles and use parentheses. But because we're using solid, this means we're going to use brackets. Brackets. Again, because of this line here. So that was step 2. Now step 3. Choose any numbers from each region that you want. So you're going to pick any number you want that's greater than 1/2. So if you want to pick 1,000, pick 1,000. I'm going to go ahead and pick 3. Then you have to pick any number in between 0 and 1/2. Now if you don't want to work with fractions, then I would change it to a decimal. So we all know that 1 divided by 2, right? 1/2 is 0.5. So this is the same thing as 0.5. So we need to pick anything in between 0 and 0.5. So I'm going to go ahead and pick 0.4. So 0.4. And then I need to pick any number less than 0. So I'm going to go ahead and pick -2. Whatever you want. Pick 3 numbers in those regions. Now, step 4. Substitute. So step 4. Substitute those numbers into the original problem. So the original problem is 6x squared minus 3x is less than or equal to 0. So that was our original problem. And we are going to plug in those numbers we just found, or that we just picked. So I'm going to go ahead and start with -2. And we're going to do exponents first, so that's 4, and then bring down the 6. So that's 24 there. And then we have -3 times -2, that's +6. And then we get 30 is less than or equal to 0, and that is not true. No, 30 should be greater. So because it's no, we're not going to shade over here. So that means none of these numbers over here would work. Okay, so now we're going to do this again. And this time I'm going to use 0.4. So I'm going to put 0.4 in for x. So 0.4 squared Okay, so that's 0.16. And then we multiply, so times 6. Then we're going to multiply right here, so negative 3 times 0.4. That's negative 1.2. And then we have 0.96 minus 1.2, and we get negative 0.24. So again, your work might be different if you had picked a different number here. So now we read this. Is negative anything, really, negative 0.24 less, so remember this makes the L for less, is it less than 0? Of course, negatives are all less than 0. So this is yes, it works. So that means that we are going to shade everything here in between. Okay, now we have one more left to do, so now we're going to do it again. Go back to the original problem and then pick the number you chose here. So I used 3. If you want to use 5 or 100 or a million, whatever you want, that's greater than a half. So then 3 squared is 9 times 6 is 54 here. Negative 3 times 3 is negative 9. And 54 minus 9 is 45. And 45 is not less than 0, so no. So I'm not going to shade over here. And then finally, our last answer is to write your solution from left to right in interval notation. So from left to right, it starts here at 0. And there's a bracket because it has the line there. And then 1/2. And again, there's a bracket. So anything in between 0 and 0.5 or 0.5 would work in this problem here. So now if we were allowed a graphing calculator, okay, so here's the graph. I typed in 6x squared minus 3x. So I typed this in right here. And again, let me zoom in here. There's 0, so that's that number right here. And then right there, that's 0.5. And the graph is below 0. So below 0, in between here and here, the graph is below 0. So when the graph is over here, so if we see here, anything bigger than 0 over here, anything over here, the graph goes up here. And any number that's greater than 1/2, so over here the graph goes up. But the graph is below the x-axis right here. It's below it in between here and here. That's what we just found. And that's how to see it graphically if you were allowed to use a graphing calculator. So if you wanted to check this further, you could pick any number between 0, including 0.5, and it will always make this problem a true statement.